Hey guys. Tonight we unfold a surprisingly tender piece of history, woven not from silk or strategy, but from wool, wind, and the delicate daily rhythm of one of the world's most enduring nomadic cultures. Welcome to the windswept steppes of Mongolia, where you wake not in a bed, not quite on the floor, and certainly not under a duvet. You wake in a yak-hair, a circular felt tent that creaks softly in the dawn, its frame groaning like an old man stretching. It's early, earlier than you'd like, the kind of early where the fire's gone out but the smoke still lingers. The air inside your yak-hair is tinged with the scent of ash, sheep, and a trace of tea leaves clinging to yesterday's pot. The wind hums against the walls, steady, ancient, and entirely uninterested in your comfort. Outside, the sun hasn't properly risen. The sky is pale, stretched thin like hide over a drum. And inside, you're tucked beneath layers, thick, hand-stitched quilts, possibly older than you, padded with yak wool and edged in indigo embroidery. But you don't get to stay here. Not for long, because the day begins with a ritual. And like all rituals, it's both ordinary and sacred. You push back the covers. Not that there's a duvet or even a top sheet, just multiple layers of wool, horsehair, and sometimes rawhide mats, stacked for warmth and flattened by sleep. You sit up, bracing for the bite of the morning chill. There are no socks. Your feet touch the ground, which is technically floorboards, though really, they're slats laid over packed earth, softened with stray wool and the occasional chicken feather. The cold climbs fast, from toe to scalp, and you're awake whether you like it or not. Now comes the first task of the day, breathing. Not metaphorically, literally. Nomads in Mongolia often start their day by opening the yak-hair flap and stepping outside to take 3 deliberate breaths. One for the land, one for the ancestors, one for the day ahead. You do this barefoot, standing in the frost, staring out over a horizon so empty it makes your thoughts echo. It's the kind of tradition that sounds poetic until your toes start to sting. Still, you do it, and when you step back inside, your breath joins the steam rising from a rekindled stove, a squat iron drum fed with dried dung. Not glamorous, but efficient. The fire is quick, popping and complaining as it devours its fuel. You hold your palms near it while the others begin to stir. Around you, the yak-hair comes alive. Your sister coughs into her sleeve. A cousin mutters something about a dream. An older uncle snores once more for good measure. And your grandmother is already sitting upright, her long braid still tightly woven, her eyes sharper than the firelight. And now, the folding begins. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights, Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You tug the first quilt free. It's heavy, heavier than it looks, and you fold it in half lengthwise. Always lengthwise. Folding it the wrong way is said to bring bad luck, though no one can quite explain why. Maybe because it ruins the embroidery. Maybe because it's just tradition. Maybe because someone once folded it crosswise and then got kicked by a horse. Historians still argue whether that story ever actually happened. The bedding has stories. This one's stitched with a pattern of golden swirls, representing wind and motion. Another has faded blue mountains sewn in tight, methodical stitches. Most are family heirlooms, passed from mother to daughter, uncle to nephew. They're not just blankets, they're biographies. You fold them with care. Not reverence exactly, but respect. Your hands move automatically now. Trained by years of practice. You line up the corners, pat out the creases, press down the edges, and stack it to the side. Quilt, mattress, hide mat, roll, fold, layer. The entire bed, such as it was, has vanished in 10 minutes. In its place is smooth floor, cleared space, a canvas ready for the day. Because in a nomad's home, everything is temporary. Every piece of space must earn its use. You glance over and see your grandmother carefully wrapping a smaller woolen mat with string and placing it on top of the main chest. She notices your look and shrugs. The gods don't like lazy folds, she says. You believe her. Because in a world where the wind can tear down your roof, where your sheep wander if you don't move fast enough, where food spoils in a blink and storms rewrite the landscape overnight, maybe folding a blanket properly is one of the few things you can actually control. And so, you fold. And the day begins. You crouch low by the fire, stretching your fingers over the warming metal of the stove, and listen to the creak of bodies rising in the morning gloom. The gir's round ceiling, darkened by years of smoke and soot, catches the first golden beams of sunlight filtering in through the smoke hole above. It's smoky, stuffy, but comforting too. Like waking up inside a bread oven that hasn't quite remembered it needs to bake something. One by one, the sleepers rise and begin the same slow-motion dance they do every morning. It's not chaotic, not exactly. More like a practiced routine, soft and murmured, with the kind of timing that only comes from years of repetition. You've done this since you were small enough to be rolled up in someone else's bedding like a dumpling. You reach for the second blanket, the one closest to the fire, warmer, dustier, tinged with the musky smell of wool and old smoke. This one's stitched in russet and teal. Slightly faded but beautifully patterned in curling lines that mimic goat horns. You shake it out once, then begin folding. It takes a few tries, your hands are still stiff, And someone always folds it wrong on purpose to see if anyone notices. Usually a cousin. You glare across the room. Guilty face. Figures. Outside, the wind kicks up again, dry and slicing, like a blade made of cold silk. The jeer trembles slightly as the flap lifts and slaps shut. Somewhere near the animal pens, a goat bleats indignantly. The fire pops again. Now comes your least favorite part, stepping outside again. It's a tradition. You remind yourself, every morning, before the bedding is stored, someone has to greet the cold. You grab a woolen shawl, wrap it tightly around your shoulders, and duck through the flap. And there it is. The Mongolian morning. Flat, vast, and bright enough to hurt your eyes. The horizon stretches so far that the clouds look like they're resting on the ground. Smoke curls from a few other gurs scattered across the steppe. Some are far enough to appear as tiny dots. Some closer with dogs lounging by their entrances, their breath puffing in little clouds. You hear distant whinnies, the jingle of harnesses, and the low, steady rhythm of hooves being dragged across frozen soil. You walk 3 slow paces away from the jeer. Breathe once, deep and full. Again, slow and steady. One more, eyes closed this time. Just listening. These breaths aren't just to wake up. They're to acknowledge the land, the sky, the spirits that whisper in the wind. You've heard people call this superstition. Others call it spiritual hygiene. And your uncle just calls it the only quiet he gets all day. Historians still argue whether this ritual traces back to shamanistic practices or is simply a clever way to keep people from snoring in too long. Either way, it sticks. You turn and head back toward the flap. Cheeks now flushed with cold and lungs humming with that distinct morning air. Equal parts milk smoke, dry grass, and frost. It's funny how you come to love the same things that freeze your ears off. Inside, someone's already moved your neatly folded mat. You groan. It's now on the wrong side of the jeer, next to the saddle rack and dangerously close to the fire tongs. You glare again. That cousin. Always that cousin. You grab the quilt, adjust the roll, and slide it into its proper resting spot, on the north side. Beneath the red lacquered chest that holds old photographs, spare boots, and at least one cracked bowl no one's allowed to throw away because it's part of a set. This chest isn't just furniture, it's geography. The interior of a jeer has invisible lines, the sacred north side, where family heirlooms rest, the southern half, where guests are welcomed, and the east and west, designated for different generations and genders. Even the bedrolls know where to go. No one writes this down, it's just known, learned, memorized, lived. You think back to that time a traveler folded their bedding and placed it on the southern side, right where the family altar sat. A scandal. You remember the look on your grandmother's face, horrified, amused, and pitying, all at once. It was like someone had put their shoes on a wedding cake. And that's just the thing. These aren't arbitrary rules. They're stories wrapped in fabric. Customs stitched into mourning habits. Your grandmother doesn't just fold her bed. She tucks the corner as though it contains the breath of her mother. Your grandfather ties his bedroll the same way he ties a saddle, with one knot and a twist that only makes sense if your hands are as weathered as his. You take a seat on the newly cleared floor and let your gaze wander to the ceiling poles. They curve up, like the ribs of a wooden whale, converging at the smoke hole where morning light streams in. One beam of light strikes your sister's hair as she braids it. Her fingers working swiftly, absently. She'll be out tending the goats soon. But for now, she's folding her bed with the same focus she uses for everything. Sharp, clean folds. 3 layers. Roll. Knot. Done. Someone sneezes. Someone complains. Someone pokes the fire. And just like that, another morning begins. You're crouched again, this time beside the folded bedrolls, tightening the leather cord that keeps them compact. The wool is scratchy against your knuckles, and the strap is stiff from the cold. But you keep winding, once around the middle, then a loop over the top. You know this by heart. Everyone does. It's a skill no one formally teaches, but everyone is expected to master by the time they've lost their first baby tooth. This particular quilt is heavy, quieter somehow. Weighted with more than just wool. It's your father's. The inside is lined with old goat hide, and the outer fabric is a deep indigo, marked by grease stains and tiny scorch holes from a long-ago campfire spark. It folds reluctantly, as if it knows it deserves better treatment. Or maybe just warmer hands. The sleeping platform beneath it isn't a bed. Not in the way you'd think of one. It's an assembly of wooden slats, hand-planed, slightly warped from years of humidity swings, tied together with leather cords that squeak when you move them. These slats rest on top of the Gur's base frame and are covered at night by hide mats and saddle blankets to soften the ground. Some families even use extra horse tack in the cold months. Nothing goes to waste. You rearrange the slats now, flattening them into a tidy panel, rolling up the hides, and sliding the cords into a corner chest. This entire routine is as ingrained as washing your face, though it's far less glamorous. You're basically packing up a campsite every morning. Because in a nomad's world, permanence is an illusion. You never truly settle, you pause. And that means every square inch of living space must be flexible. The floor where your father slept last night. That's where your cousin will stack dried dung bricks by noon. The spot your sister used for her hair braiding? That becomes the tea brewing zone before the sun hits high noon. And the chest you used to store your rolled-up bedding? That chest will be your dinner table tonight. There's an elegant efficiency to it all, though. Admittedly, less elegant when you're fumbling with cold fingers and someone's goat is sticking its head through the flap again. You hear a grunt from the back of the jeer. It's your grandmother again, reaching for her quilt. She doesn't fold it so much as perform a ceremony with it, straightening every corner. Smoothing the fabric with hands that remember 20 years of stitching. She hums to herself, a low melody that sounds older than the hills, and whispers something about the wind having teeth today. The folding platform creaks under her weight. She's sitting now, cross-legged, rolling the mat into itself with the kind of precision you'd expect from a general prepping battle plans. You watch, fascinated. It's hypnotic. Almost. She never rushes. Even when someone's clattering about trying to boil milk nearby. She folds like time isn't invited. And then she says it. Do it like the ancestors did. Or don't do it at all. You've heard it before. It's her favorite saying. But this morning, it sticks differently. Because now you're the one tying knots. The one placing bedrolls. The one who'll someday teach some grumpy child to do the same. Historians still argue whether Mongolian bedfolding was shaped more by shamanist cosmology or simple spatial necessity. Either way, the ritual survived centuries through empire, invasion, Soviet occupation, and global tourism. It's still here, quiet, unchanged. A sneeze cuts the silence. Then a laugh. Then a crash. Someone's dropped the bucket. You glance over and see your cousin staring at an upturned pail, sheepishly shrugging as fermented mare's milk slowly oozes across the floor. It's always the cousin. You sigh. He's going to knock over the bedrolls next. But no, miraculously. They're safe. Your stack holds strong. Leather straps taut. Corners lined like bricks. For now, at least. You return to your work. The last piece is a small cushion. Not a pillow exactly. More like a square of tightly packed sheep wool. Wrapped in patterned cotton and embroidered with a single deer. You recognize the design. It's your aunt's handiwork. She stitched it during a storm. You're told. Using a needle made from an ox horn and thread spun from horse mane. It's faded now. But still there, still soft. Still holding someone's neck a little higher each night. You fold it gently, set it on top of the chest, and stretch your back. The platform is bare. The quilts are rolled. The bed is gone. It's now a floor. Just like that. Your grandmother nods without looking. Outside, the wind picks up again, lifting the flap and rattling the hanging charms on the entrance beam. A crow caws in the distance. Then silence. Another bed has vanished. Another morning, neatly folded. You rub your hands together again, coaxing a little warmth into your fingers. The jeer is quieter now, beds folded, blankets packed, the space transformed into what it was always meant to be by day, a multi-purpose dome of existence. Breakfast simmers in a squat pot, and the scent of barley porridge and smoky milk drifts lazily toward your nose. But before bowls are passed and tea is poured, there's still one final step in the morning ritual: the inspection. Your grandmother performs this with all the solemnity of a palace steward. She glides across the floor, well, not glides exactly, more like hobbles with dignity, and surveys the rolls of bedding lined along the north wall. Her eyes scan the cords, the corners, the stack order. She grunts once, adjusts a quilt that dared lean left, and mutters something about folds so crooked they'd confuse a horse. Then she claps her hands once, sharply, a seal of approval. The jeer, for now, is in order. It's strange how comforting that is. You wouldn't think folding a bed the wrong way could cause actual anxiety. But here, it's not just aesthetics. It's about balance, harmony. You've been told since you could walk that if the folds are messy, the day will be, too. You used to think that was superstition. Then you left your corner quilt half-bunched once and broke a ceramic bowl before lunch. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe your grandmother hexed you with her mind. Either way, today the folds are good. You exhale and reach for your cup. It's a dented tin thing, still warm from rinsing, and you fill it with salty milk tea poured from a cracked kettle. The tea is thick, hot, a little strange to modern taste buds, made with brick tea leaves boiled into submission. A slab of butter, and a fistful of salt. You sip it slowly. It hits your stomach like a small campfire. The kettle sits beside the hearth, which is technically a metal stove, but hearth feels more accurate. It radiates life, warmth, soot, stories. Next to it is the fire poker, and leaning on the wall, your grandfather's favorite saddle, worn smooth by years of use, polished by weather and time. On top of that saddle, his quilt, folded perfectly. No one touches it. He passed it down last year, but the quilt still smells like him: wind, horsehair, and a hint of pine. It stays folded, but not used. Not yet. Maybe not ever. You glance at the ceiling again. Light filters through the smoke hole, golden and angular now, catching on particles of dust dancing lazily in the warmth. It's peaceful, clean, balanced. And then, someone sneezes. Loud, wet, catastrophic. It echoes like a drumbeat in the small space. And sure enough, your cousin stumbles back, knocks a folded blanket out of its neat stack, and sets off a chain reaction of unspooling chaos. One roll hits another. That one tilts. A stack collapses. Silence. You all freeze. Your grandmother, already armed with a wooden spoon, doesn't yell. She doesn't have to. She just raises one eyebrow so sharply it could shave a goat. Your cousin immediately begins refolding with the desperation of someone who knows he's on thin ice. You look away. You shouldn't laugh, but it bubbles out anyway. And here's the thing. They say folding bedding is a quiet, serene task. And it is. But it's also hilarious, infuriating, deeply personal, and occasionally dangerous. One time someone found a live scorpion tucked under a corner. Another time, a mouse had made its winter home in a felt mat. And let's not even talk about the time a child tried to help and tied all the quilts together with horse reins. Historians still argue whether the careful folding of bedrolls was primarily an act of reverence or an early form of nomadic timekeeping, like resetting a sundial. But fuzzier. One theory even suggests it functioned as a memory device, keeping the structure of the household literally intact. Fold by fold, in a world that could be packed and moved by noon. Outside, the sun has lifted above the eastern hillocks, painting the grasslands in golden light. You hear neighing, your sister's already tending to the horses. The goats have been let loose. The wind's picked up again, teasing the edges of the flap door. And someone's calling your name. Time to go. But you take one last look at the stack of bedding, at the saddle-turned nightstand, at the floor, clean, bare, quietly waiting. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Same folds, same ritual, same wild, windy morning. And somehow, you don't mind at all. You step outside, squinting as the cold air kisses your cheeks, and the morning glare washes across the open steppe. There's something strangely invigorating about this particular part of the day, when the gear is clean. The beds are folded, and the world feels in place. You tug your shawl tighter and stretch your spine, as if trying to shake out whatever creaks have clung to your ribs overnight. To your left, a cousin is carrying a saddle across their back like a beast of burden. To your right, someone's hanging horse tack from a nearby post, humming a tune that has no words but feels older than the grass. You notice how the earth crunches underfoot, just a hint of frost, already beginning to thaw. Today is a travel day, which means every single bed that was lovingly folded will be unfolded again, re-rolled, tied more tightly, and slung onto yaks or into carts, depending on the family's wealth and stubbornness. You step back into the gear. The packing has begun. The once open floor, bare just moments ago, is now a flurry of movement. Wooden frames are collapsing inward. Chests are sealed. Rugs rolled like scrolls. Every item has its order. Every piece its dance step. And the bedding? The bedding is the crown jewel. The final flourish. The part that everyone handles with slightly more reverence and a lot more muttering. You pick up your quilt again, your own this time. Stitched in saffron and teal. A little frayed at the edges. You brush off a stray bit of hay. Fold it once in half. Then again into thirds. You press your hand across the seams. Flat. Smooth. Done. Now comes the wrapping. A narrow belt of leather, softened from years of sweat and smoke, gets cinched around it like a ribbon. You tie it tight, tuck the knot underneath so it doesn't snag, and carry the bundle outside. Waiting there is a saddlebag already half full with tools, dried curds, and a pot wrapped in cloth. You gently wedge your bedroll in beside it, as if tucking in a small animal for the ride. Nearby, someone's loading their quilt into a cart drawn by an ox that looks like it's never been impressed by anything. Ever. The scene is calm, practiced, but you remember the first time you saw a jeer being taken apart. You were 5, maybe 6, wide-eyed and horrified. "We're ruining it," you'd whispered. "We'll never get it back the same." Your aunt had laughed. "That's the point." And now you understand. Mongolian life is built on rhythms, not walls, on routines that travel, on rituals that don't require architecture. Folding the bed isn't just about tidiness, it's about portability. A packed quilt is a portable bedroom, an archive of sleep, comfort, warmth, and, if you're lucky, dreams. There's a joke your grandfather used to tell. Just before a move, if your bed fits, your soul comes with it. It's funnier when you're not carrying 3 quilts uphill in sleet. Historians still argue whether the nomadic emphasis on bedding was primarily spiritual or practical. Some claim the act of wrapping bedding was a symbolic closure of the night, like putting sleep back in a box. Others suggest it was simply smart logistics in a lifestyle where one's entire home could, and did, move dozens of times a year. Either way, it mattered. And you feel it now, watching the cart sway gently as more bundles are added. Your cousin ties one knot too many and has to start over. Another is chasing a rogue blanket that's caught the wind like a sail. Someone else is standing still, just watching the horizon, bedroll cradled in their arms like a baby goat. In a few minutes, the jeer will be gone, disassembled. Only the scorched earth beneath the hearth will remain, faintly warm, like a memory that hasn't quite cooled. But the beds? They'll be with you, on backs, in carts, in laps. And tonight, when the poles go up again, and the rugs are laid, and the stove is lit once more, you'll unroll the quilt, flatten the creases, and know you're home. Wherever that happens to be. By mid-morning, the gurs are all but vanished, leaving only a flattened patch of earth and a few divots in the frost-crusted grass. You walk across the space that had, only an hour ago, been your living room, your dining room, your bedroom, and marvel at how little remains. No walls, no roof, just tracks in the soil and a lingering curl of smoke, like a ghost refusing to leave politely. You're on the move now. Your bedroll jostles gently on the side of a pack horse, tied down with careful knots and a string of tiny blue talismans meant to ward off bad dreams. You're told they were stitched by a wandering monk with a lazy eye and excellent embroidery skills. The caravan winds its way through a shallow valley, the wind nudging the grass into waves, and you watch as the other riders adjust their loads. A woman is tightening the blanket around her youngest child, who's slumped sideways and drooling onto a pile of sheepskin. Another man rearranges his saddle blanket, mumbling about wrinkled karma. A group of teenage cousins rides ahead, trying to play a game involving stones and shouted insults. All the while, the bedrolls ride quietly behind them, bouncing in unison with each rise and fall of the terrain. It's a strange thing to think about, how a simple act like folding your bed becomes part of the landscape. Part of the journey. These quilts, mats, and slats have traveled more miles than most people will walk in their entire lives. They've been rolled and unrolled on mountaintops, riverbanks, dusty plains, and at least once, on the frozen edge of a glacier. A bad idea. You're told. Quilt froze stiff in 10 minutes. Historians still argue whether Mongolian nomads developed their folding methods purely through necessity, or if there were inherited symbolic layers passed down from Turkic and even Scythian traditions. What's agreed upon is this: nothing in a gyr is accidental, especially the bedding. You pass a stone marker, carved with symbols so old even your grandfather admitted he was guessing at their meaning. Nearby, a hawk circles, then dives into the grass and vanishes with something squeaky. Nature wastes no time. By noon, you stop to rest. The horses are watered, the people are watered, and the quilts are quietly stacked on the shaded side of the packs. You sit near your cousin again, who's fiddling with the leather cord of his bedroll like he's solving a puzzle. It's too tight, and the mat is bulging like a badly wrapped dumpling. You nudge him with your foot. Undo the knot and start over. He glares at you like you've just insulted his ancestors. It's fine. It's lumpy. Your face is lumpy. The banter is automatic. The laughter that follows is genuine. It carries across the group and earns you a half-hearted scolding from your aunt, who reminds you, once again, that you can laugh all you like. But if that quilt gets wet from the river crossing, he's sleeping under a yak. The moment passes, and you both start adjusting the bedroll. Properly this time. The quilt is surprisingly light for how warm it is. The inside is padded with a blend of sheep wool and felted camel down, a combination said to be warmer than jealousy and harder to clean than your uncle's reputation. You smooth out the creases, align the edges, and retie the cord in a double wrap. Satisfying. Behind you, someone starts boiling tea again. It's an odd time for tea. But then again, there's never really a wrong time. The smell cuts through the midday air, rich and earthy, with a hint of charcoal and milk. You sigh and lean back on your folded quilt for just a second, letting the breeze slide across your cheeks. You close your eyes. And for a moment, just one, you're not in the middle of the steppe. You're home, or rather, your home is with you, tucked beneath your spine, folded carefully, waiting. Because that's the genius of it all, isn't it? You don't leave home, you carry it. And tonight, when the jeer is raised again, and the rug's unfurled, and someone shouts about missing firewood or forgetting the stovepipe, you'll roll out your bed again like a magician's trick. A whole life, in one wool-wrapped bundle. You arrive at the new campsite by late afternoon. It isn't a dramatic location, just a patch of flattish ground near a narrow stream with water cold enough to wake your ancestors. But there's enough grass for the animals and enough space between families to allow for neighborly bickering without full-on warfare. In other words, perfect. The moment you dismount, the choreography begins. Poles, rugs, ropes, and pegs emerge like a conjuring act. The jeer takes shape with practiced rhythm, floor frame, walls, roof rain. Children run barefoot with hammerstones. Women align felt sheets like they're upholstering the sky. And the men pretend to be very important by squinting at the horizon and offering unhelpful suggestions. But your job, as always, is the bedding. Specifically, unloading, unrolling, and positioning it precisely inside the jeer so that everything is ready once the felt goes on. You untie your quilt bundle from the side of the pack horse, the leather strap stiff with travel dust. Carefully, reverently, you carry it inside the half-built frame and lay it in its designated quadrant, the east sleep corner, which you once misheard as eat sleeper and got teased about for 3 years. There's a system to it. The elders get the warmest spots, closer to the stove but not too close to the door. Married couples are arranged so that their bedding faces the shrine wall. Younger children are crammed into nooks like decorative sacks. You, being in that awkward in-between age, get the spot that shifts depending on who sneezes. You unroll your quilt onto the sheepskin rug beneath it. The wool flattens with a faint FWUMP, and the scent of smoke, yak, and faint butter hits your nose like a fond memory. Across from you, your cousin is still struggling with his own bedroll. He tugs it too hard and the knot refuses to yield. With a grunt, he attempts the tried and true method of growling at it. The knot remains unfazed. You try not to laugh too much. Eventually, your grandmother enters, inspects the bedroll placements like a seasoned general surveying a battlefield, and gives a sharp nod. The jeer isn't finished yet, but the beds are in place. And that makes it halfway to a home. One of the most overlooked aspects of Mongolian jeer life is how the bedding defines the invisible architecture. Historians still argue whether these spatial divisions date back to pre-Buddhist shamanistic principles or are simply the result of centuries of social negotiation inside a circular home with no rooms. Either way, your quilt is as much a boundary line as a comfort device. You flop down onto the bedding. It's a brief rest, 10 seconds max, before someone yells for you to help with the door flap, but it's glorious. You stretch your legs, breathe deeply, feel the dust settle into your hair. And in that moment, you remember that not all folds are practical. Some are sentimental, some are ceremonial. There's an old story you once heard around a winter fire. A bride refused to unroll her wedding quilt until her husband said her name 3 times in front of the shrine. She waited, and finally, she re-rolled it and rode away. No one knows if it's true. But you've always liked the drama of it. Even now, the act of unrolling feels like an invitation. A signal. You've arrived. You're staying. For now. Outside, the light shifts again. Amber bleeding into rust, and the hills catch the last of the sun like it's a secret. Inside the jeer, your bed waits. Not in a bedroom. Not behind a door. But in the open, honest center of things. Folded, unfolded, familiar. Like a story you've heard so many times, you forget which parts are yours. Twilight wraps its arms around the steppe as the stove crackles to life, sending gentle puffs of smoke curling through the roof hole. Inside the jeer, the air has begun to warm, just enough to peel off one shawl. Not quite enough to ditch the socks. You sit cross-legged on your freshly laid bedroll, picking straw from your sleeves and watching your grandmother sort through her lacquered wooden chest. It's not just storage, it's a biography in box form. She lifts out a folded quilt. This one older than you. Dyed the color of rust and lined with geometric stitching. She pats it as if greeting an old friend. Then refolds it with expert precision, corner to corner. Press. Then roll inward like a scroll. You've watched her do this your entire life. And yet every time, it's mesmerizing. There's a rhythm to it, like prayer. But softer. You reach for your own chest. It's simpler, newer, and far less elegant. Inside, your spare blanket, a slightly bent comb, a pouch of dried juniper berries, and a carved piece of bone that might have once been part of a game, or a failed attempt at making a whistle. You fold your blanket again. Not because you need to. Just because it feels right. Mongolian nomads didn't have closets, wardrobes, or linen cupboards. What they had was memory. Tied with string, every item had a place. And that place wasn't always visible, it was folded into bundles. Tucked beneath seats, or layered under ceremonial rugs. Even a poorly folded blanket could be a social clue. Careless rolls meant a careless mind. Too tight knots? Maybe too tense a spirit. Historians still argue whether these folding rituals originated purely from spatial efficiency or carried deeper symbolic weight tied to ancestral traditions and Buddhist alignment. Some say the number of folds mattered. Others insist the placement was more important than the method. But all agree, none of it was random. Across the gyre, a toddler is playing with a scrap of quilt and a wooden spoon. Pretending to cook for a stuffed goat. You try not to laugh too loudly as they serve it to the hearth with a deep bow. The folding of beds isn't just a morning activity, it's a life cycle. When a child is born, their first bedding is folded by the eldest hand in the gyre, usually a grandmother. Unless she's off wrestling a stubborn sheep or chasing gossip. The fold is meant to set the sleep. A superstition that claims your very dreams will follow the angle of your first blanket crease. You glance over at your cousin, fast asleep. Face half buried in his pillow. One foot sticking out like a flag of surrender. His quilt is slightly askew. One corner not quite flush. You're tempted to fix it. But he'll wake. And then you'll be stuck listening to his theory about how proper folding leads to lucid dreaming. Again. You reach for your tea. It's cooled now, but still good. Smoky. Slightly sour. Comforting. Around you, the gyre is quieting. The fire hums. A pot simmers somewhere, bubbling slowly. A single fly bounces against the window covering, clearly as lost as everyone else. And all around, folded beds sit like silent witnesses. Some rolled, some stacked, some already being unrolled for early sleepers. You pull your own bedding closer. The movement is habitual, adjusting folds, tucking corners, creating just the right dip in the sheepskin underlay. It's not about comfort, not entirely. It's about ritual, repetition, the slow recreation of the same sleeping shape, over and over, across different places, seasons, and years. There's an old phrase your mother uses when someone's restless. Their bed's too noisy. It doesn't mean the bed makes sound. It means the person forgot how to fold the day away. You stretch your back, let out a long, unceremonious sigh, and start to press the quilt down around your legs. Soft, still warm from the stove's breath, smelling faintly of dust and juniper and goat. You close your eyes, just for a second. Just long enough to remember that this isn't just about sleep. It's about knowing how to stop. The night deepens, and with it comes a hush that only the steppe can produce. A stillness not from silence but from knowing everything has found its place. Inside the jeer, your body has begun to match the rhythm of the fire. Inhale. Glow. Exhale. Fade. You're half buried beneath your quilt now. Not sleeping yet. Just listening to the subtle creaks of the wooden lattice walls and the faint jingle of harnesses outside. Tomorrow, the process will begin again. But not yet. For now, the beds are still, tucked, folded, waiting. And there's one more thing you always do before sleep fully claims you. You look toward the chests. They sit along the north wall, lacquered with age, painted in colors that have faded but still speak. Saffron, crimson, indigo, some chipped, some cracked, but every box has a story, and every quilt inside has known a different version of this moment. You remember helping your aunt clean one of those chests last spring. Beneath a stack of embroidered cushions, she'd found a folded quilt wrapped in oilcloth. You'd never seen it before, navy with gold edges, stiff with preservation. She'd touched it like it might vanish. Wedding quilt, she said. Whose wedding? She didn't answer. She just wrapped it and tucked it deeper into the chest. That's how things work here. You don't always need to know the story to honor it. There's something sacred in the way bedrolls are stored. They're not shoved under beds, there are no beds, or stuffed into corners. They're arranged with intent. The chest isn't just a container, it's a protector, a memory keeper. Your grandmother once said that a poorly stored bed invites confusion. The dreams don't know where to return. She told you, as if dreams were pigeons who needed a nesting box. And so, each night, you help fold every extra blanket just so. Smooth the top, align the edges, tie the thin cotton ribbon. Not tight, just right. Historians still argue whether this nightly ritual originated from shamanic dream rituals, or if it simply evolved from the practical need to avoid mice making nests in unrolled bedding. Either way, the effect is the same: peace. There's a tenderness to it. You see it now as your uncle begins his own folding. He's not graceful, but he's methodical. His hands are calloused, but they handle the blanket like it's breakable. He tucks one edge, then pats it, adjusts the top, then, with the sort of shrug a man gives when satisfied with his work, he nods and moves on. A child sneezes in their sleep. Someone mutters in a dream. The fire shifts, releasing a soft crack that sounds like a saw. And you wonder, not for the first time, if anyone has ever mapped a person's life by their quilts. You could, maybe, birth blankets, wedding duvets, travel quilts, funeral shrouds, each one folded, stored, moved, replaced. Each one marking a chapter. Even yours, as plain as it is, carries a map you know by heart. The stitched repair from that winter your cousin spilled tea. The faded patch where the fire ember landed. The seam that never quite lined up after you washed it in the river. You trace it absently with your fingertip. It's not luxurious, not even symmetrical. But it's yours. And every night you fold it, you're reminding yourself where you've been, and where you hope to sleep again. The wind outside grows stronger, pressing against the jeer like a curious spirit. The canvas rustles, the roof poles creak. But inside, everything remains in place. Order in the fold. Peace in the roll. And in the chest across from you, underneath a stack of dyed cushions and cedar chips, rests the future. Unfolded, waiting. The morning arrives not with sunlight, but with sound. First, the bleating of goats, then the low grunt of a camel shifting its weight, then the unmistakable thunk-thunk of someone outside chopping kindling with a rhythm best described as aggressive optimism. You stretch beneath your quilt and blink up at the ceiling. Wooden spokes radiating from the central smoke hole like a sun you forgot was watching. Another day on the steppe. And like all others, it starts with folding. You sit up slowly, limbs heavy with that particular kind of stiffness that comes from sleeping in dry air and dreaming in a language older than speech. Your blanket has become a bit of a mess overnight, bunched at the corner. Twisted at the foot, but nothing that can't be set right. You start with the edges. Align, flatten, smooth. It's a little meditative, like writing poetry in wool. Across from you, your aunt is already halfway through her routine. She's folding her bedding with such efficiency it makes your own process look like performance art. Her hands move quickly, confidently, pressing corners, patting seams, rolling tightly into a neat bundle she ties with a crimson sash. You saw. She sees you watching and raises an eyebrow. Still learning, she teases. You nod solemnly, still waking. In Gers, the sleeping area never stays still. By mid-morning, it will vanish. Blankets folded, sheepskins rolled, bed frames, if there were any, stacked or repositioned to serve as stools. The space becomes communal again, used for meals, prayers, mending boots, scolding children, or, if you're lucky, napping again. But right now, it's transition time. You tuck the last edge of your quilt under and start your own rolling. It's not perfect, but it's close. One fold too wide, perhaps, a corner a little stubborn, but functional. You secure it with the braided string hanging from a wooden peg near your chest and push the whole roll into its assigned spot. Done. Almost. The final step? Sit on it. Not to flatten it, though that helps, but to prove it's real. A habit that comes from generations of nomads unsure whether their bedding might try to puff itself back open like a woolen ghost. You take your seat, balanced, steady. Now it's officially folded. Historians still argue whether this meticulous morning routine served mainly hygienic purposes or evolved from spiritual practices of resetting one's energy. What's certain is this: no matter how early, no matter how tired, everyone folds. Even the children. Though they do so with a degree of flair and occasional sabotage. There's your little cousin now, dragging her blanket across the floor like she's taming a dragon. She plops down in the center of it, attempts a spin, and ends up tying herself into a half knot. Her brother watches and applauds like she's performed a trick. You're tempted to help, but you don't. This is part of it. Learning to fold is learning to live in motion. The gear may be circular, but nomadic life moves forward, camp to camp, season to season, fold to fold. You once met a herder who claimed he could predict a family's migration pattern just by the way they folded their bedding. Loose folds? Going south. Tight and square? Heading for the hills. You're not sure if he was joking. He did have the most neatly coiled bedroll you'd ever seen. The stove crackles again, and your mother places a kettle on top. Tea soon. You smile. And then, Just as the last bed is folded and the chests latched, someone calls out from outside. Visitors. Unexpected ones. The speed of transformation is breathtaking. Quilts that had just been tied are suddenly tucked deeper. Sheepskins are repurposed into cushions. Chests become tables. You help drape a clean rug across the ground. A cushion is fluffed. The kettle is wiped, as if steam alone might offend a guest. And the bedrolls? Gone. Disappeared into corners, beneath covers, folded into invisibility. To an outsider, the gear now looks like it has never even heard of sleeping. But you know better. Under every layer is another one. Under every fold, a memory. And even the most perfectly stored quilt carries the shape of the body it warmed. You glance at your own bundle, now hidden but close. Folded, warm, waiting for night. They arrive on horseback, of course. 2 riders, wrapped in layered deals, their boots dusty, their brows furrowed in the way all messengers seem to wear worry like an accessory. One is older, his horse slow and steady. The other is young, barely taller than the saddle horn, but riding like the steppe raised him. You nod a greeting as they dismount. They nod back, wordless, already stretching legs and scanning the camp. It's early. Too early for guests. Which is why every quilt has vanished. Every bed rolled so tightly it might as well be a scroll. This is where the bedfolding becomes art. Because in the world of Mongolian hospitality, presentation matters. And no matter how deep your exhaustion, how hard the ground was the night before, how tangled your blanket became, none of that can show. When guests arrive, your gear becomes a stage. Your bed? Gone. Your tea? Already steeping. Your smile? Polished. Your uncle moves swiftly, retrieving a stool, brushing it off with the hem of his deal. Your cousin lights incense with a smoldering twig. And you? You grab the backup quilt, the decorative one. Not for sleeping, for showing. It's laid out carefully near the fire. Angled just so. Part seating, part status symbol. The riders enter. They don't comment on the bedding. That's the point. To them, the space is neat, warm, inviting, but to you, it's a museum of folded memories. The rolled quilts hidden behind the chests. The tied bundles tucked beneath low tables. Each one folded hastily but correctly. Tied in haste but with care. And no one, not even these keen-eyed travelers, would ever guess that 10 minutes ago. This room held 5 bodies asleep and a toddler eating dried cheese directly off the quilt. Historians still argue whether this kind of rapid bed disappearance practice was a byproduct of spiritual respect or simply survival instinct shaped by centuries of mobility. Either way, it became part of the nomadic social code. Beds are private. Guests see only the hospitality, never the behind the scenes. You pour tea. The older rider accepts it with both hands, bowing slightly. The younger one sneaks glances around the jeer. Curious. Maybe he's learning. Maybe he's judging. Hard to say. Either way, you know what he won't find: unfolded bedding. You shift to sit on a chest. It creaks faintly beneath you, reminding you of the quilt inside, the one your mother embroidered in summer during a dust storm so long ago. The thread's still rough from grit. It hasn't been used in years. But you still fold it once a season, out of respect. Folding wakes memory, your grandmother says, and memory keeps the dreams close. You think about that now as you watch the guests sip their tea, oblivious to the dance you all performed in the last 10 minutes. You don't resent them. This is how it's always been. The nomadic bed is not just a comfort. It's a test. Can you carry it? Fold it? Hide it? Can you reset your life every morning and not leave a trace? Because that's the unspoken rule here: if you fold your bed well, you can move. If you can move, you can survive. And if you can survive, you can greet anyone at your door, rider, neighbor, spirit, with calm. The fire pops. The older guest smiles. The jeer, transformed, smiles with him. When the guests finally depart, bellies warmed, saddlebags heavier with curd cakes than when they arrived, the camp exhales. It's not that visitors are unwelcome. Far from it. But their presence turns the ordinary into performance. Now, with the hoofbeats fading, you can return to the unpolished rhythm of daily life. And, perhaps more importantly, prepare for movement. Because in this part of the world, no bedding stays folded for long. You step out of the jeer and squint at the horizon. The wind has shifted, brushing the grass backward. There's a particular way the air smells before a move, not dusty, not wet, just ready. You catch your mother and father exchanging the sort of glance that means it's time. Tomorrow, maybe the next day, you'll be heading to a new pasture. And with that comes the need for your bed to become more than a resting place. It has to become luggage. So you unfold it. Not to use, but to check. Wool blankets laid out on the felt. Corners inspected for wear. Rips noted. Threads tightened. The sun does its part. 2. Warming the fabric. Airing out the smells of firewood and breath. And once it's fresh again, you begin the transformation. Rolling for travel is different than rolling for mourning. The folds are firmer, corners sharper, padding must be even, or the whole bundle will ride awkwardly when strapped to the cart or pack animal. The outer layer is wrapped in oilcloth or tucked inside a dyed canvas bag stitched generations ago. Some families even embroider symbols onto these travel bags: waves, antlers, clouds, part tradition, part superstition. You find your family's mark, a small stitched circle with 4 rays. Sun on a wheel, your aunt once called it. Or maybe it was spinning fire. She wasn't sure. It's older than her. Securing the roll is a 2-person job. You hold the edges while your father loops the rope in practiced coils. Then he tests the balance by lifting it slightly off the ground. A grunt. Try again, he says. You sigh and unroll the entire thing. 3rd time's the charm. This time, it works. Tight, balanced, ready. Historians still argue whether these tightly packed bedrolls inspired later military sleeping gear or were adapted from even older Turkic methods of transport. What's clear is this: nomads understood weight distribution long before engineers gave it names. You watch as the other families begin their own preparations. Chests are inspected, wheels are oiled, tent ropes untied. A child runs past carrying a pillow, nearly tripping on a goat. Someone laughs. The camp starts to look less like a village and more like a collection of intentions. Bundles grow. Lines of gear snake toward the waiting ox carts. Horses are saddled. And above it all, bedding rolls pile higher. Stacks of sleep about to migrate. You pause to run your hand across the top of your own bundle. It's not just a quilt now. It's your future nest. Your traveling shadow. And as you lift it, with your arms and your back and your memory, you feel something shift. Not the weight, but the meaning. Because now, your bed has become your proof that you were here. That you knew how to fold. That you're ready to go. The journey begins before the sun truly rises. In the gray hush between stars and daylight, the camp moves like a great beast waking, slow, creaky, full of yawns and missteps. You hoist your bedroll onto the cart with more effort than grace. It's heavier in the morning. Somehow. Or maybe you're just tired. Either way, it lands with a thud beside the grain sacks. Your father adjusts it so it doesn't shift. The cart will rock. The roads, if you can even call them that, will jolt and bounce. If the bedroll tumbles, it might unravel. And that's not a sight anyone wants to see. Wool flapping in the wind like a very sleepy flag. And so it's tied. Again. Double knotted. Because once you're on the move, your bed becomes part of the caravan. It ceases to be personal and starts to be practical. Storage, padding, even seating, if the cart grows crowded and legs need a break. Still, you glance back at it more than once as you ride. It's strange how attached you can get to something that doesn't breathe. The landscape scrolls by. Open plains, dust devils, herds that look like scattered commas on the parchment of the earth. The sky never ends here. You pass another family moving in the opposite direction. Their gear strapped across their cart. Their bedrolls piled high like colorful bread loaves. You nod to them. They nod back. There's a silent kinship among the folded. By midday, the sun's glare forces a stop. Too hot to keep moving. Everyone fans out. Animals drink. Bread is passed around. You use your bedroll as a backrest beneath a scraggly tree. It's not shady. Exactly. But it tries. And there, reclining, biting into a piece of hard cheese, you notice the stitching on your quilt is starting to come undone. Just a little, a corner thread fraying. You run your thumb over it, then dig into your pocket for the needle pouch. Time to repair. Because that's the other rule no one says out loud. If you carry your bed, you care for it, you mend it, you preserve its dignity, even if no one else will ever see the inside seams. A small breeze stirs the cloth as you work. Historians still argue whether steppe nomads developed these personal maintenance rituals for utility or identity. Was it necessity? Pride? A subtle act of self-expression in a life of constant motion? Probably both. You finish the stitch, knot it tight, and smooth the fabric once more. Not perfect, but it never is. That afternoon, the caravan resumes. Another few hours of slow, bouncing movement. A child sings something tuneless. Someone sneezes. You catch a hawk riding the thermals above. Wings outstretched like punctuation on a sentence too old to read. When you finally arrive at the new campsite, the work begins again. Unpack, raise the gear, stake the ropes, secure the stovepipe, and then unroll. You do it almost automatically. Lay out the quilt, shake it once, twice, let it breathe, let it remember it's a bed. There's a satisfaction in that, like reuniting with a friend. You fluff the wool, fold the edges under, sit on it once, as tradition dictates. The day's dust settles in the creases. You lie back, just for a second. The ground is still warm. The gear isn't even finished yet. But this moment, between unpacking and dinner, is yours. A rolled quilt carried across the plains, opened again beneath a sky full of dust and gold. You've made it. Folded, unfolded. Still here. Night returns with a gentleness the steppe rarely shows. The last embers in the hearth crackle as someone adds a final piece of dried dung to keep it smoldering until morning. Outside, the wind picks up in short, polite gusts. Just enough to rustle the tent walls and nudge a wool sock off its peg. Inside the jeer, you sit cross-legged, brushing dust from the edge of your newly unfolded bed. It's funny. This morning, this same quilt was a parcel of possibility. Now, it's a patch of permanence again. And it's calling. But first, the ritual. Everyone has their own way. Your grandmother smooths the sheepskin before laying the quilt on top. Her hands firm but reverent. Your cousin arranges her 2 tiny pillows as if expecting royalty. Your uncle doesn't bother with niceties. He just drops onto his roll like a sack of potatoes and snores within seconds. You, though, you have a process. You kneel beside your bedroll and press down the corners again. Not to flatten them, but to offer a kind of blessing. A way of saying, "Thank you for carrying me. Now carry me again." The blanket still holds the shape of your back from the night before. A gentle hollow molded by repetition. It's comforting. You slip under it, adjusting the edge just beneath your chin, and sigh. The scent is familiar: smoke, wool, a hint of grass, and the faintest trace of milk tea. This, more than the fire, more than the jeer itself, is home. Outside, a neighbor's dog barks once. Someone laughs in the distance. A baby hiccups. Then stillness. You stare upward, toward the wooden spokes of the ceiling. No stars tonight. Just canvas and flickering shadow. Still, you know they're out there, watching. This is the kind of quiet that doesn't ask questions. It just is. You close your eyes. Then open them again. Because you forgot. The fold. You sit up and reach over to the edge of the bed where the quilt puckers. You smooth it once, lightly, instinctively. You've been told it's unnecessary. That once you've unfolded, the night takes care of the rest. But you don't quite believe that. Your fingers linger, pressing out a wrinkle. Smooth bed, smooth dreams. Your aunt once whispered as she tucked you in after a thunderstorm. You believed her. You still do. Historians still argue whether these bedtime rituals were learned behaviors passed down through oral tradition or simply born from repetition. Was the fold a gesture of respect? Or just a habit that became sacred? Either way, it brings peace. You settle back down, limbs tucked, breath steady. Across the gyre, the others drift off one by one. A gentle chorus of breath and occasional murmurs. Dreams bloom behind closed eyes. Your own bed warms quickly, holding you like memory. In the distance, wolves cry, a sound less threatening than lonesome. You pull the edge of the blanket higher and let yourself float in that small space between awake and asleep, where thoughts wander but never land. A fold, a breath, a quiet. This is what you carry, across distances and generations. The wisdom of sleep wrapped in wool. You wake before the sun again. That barely there moment when the sky is still dark, but no longer night. Your breath clouds the air, and your blanket clings with a sleepy kind of warmth, hard to let go. Harder to stay inside. The rest of the gyre is silent except for the faint wheeze of someone's dream-heavy exhale. You sit up slowly, blanket trailing behind your shoulders like a cape made of yesterday. And then you do the thing you always do. You fold. One corner, then the other, a little tug, a flatten, the center crease, the roll. The same sequence that began in your childhood. The same fold you've watched older hands perform with reverence. The same fold you'll teach. Someday, maybe, to someone even smaller than you are now. Outside, the wind has picked up. Cold this morning, crisp. You work quickly, but not carelessly, because today, like every day, you will not leave a mess behind. Not even a wrinkle, especially not a wrinkle. Folded bedding is a kind of punctuation. A full stop at the end of the night. You tuck the bundle away near the wooden chest. Neatly, silently. You even fluff the cushion where your head rested as though it were a guest and not just a worn scrap of sheepskin. There's dignity in repetition. No one tells you to do it. No one claps when you're done. But this little act, the folding of a bed in the cold silence of dawn, is as sacred as any ceremony. Historians still argue whether the meticulousness of nomadic daily life, like folding beds with such precision, was shaped more by spiritual respect or necessity of movement. Was it about tidiness, or testimony? Maybe both. You duck outside. The camp is just beginning to rouse. A fire smolders under a metal kettle. A neighbor stretches and cracks his back. Horses stamp their hooves in frost-crusted grass. You nod to no one in particular and breathe in the new morning. Behind you, your gear stands still, stitched and secure. Inside, your bed waits. Not to be slept in, but to be unfolded again tonight. Or tomorrow. Or the day after. You smile. It's ready. Just like you. So now, here you are, wrapped not in wool but in stillness. The fire has burned down to gentle coals, casting soft reddish light on the floor of the jeer. Outside, the steppe sleeps. No hoofbeats, no laughter. Just wind whispering through grass that doesn't care who you are or where you go. And yet, you've gone far tonight. You've folded and unfolded your bedroll a dozen times in your mind. Run your fingers across coarse wool and tiny stitched suns. Watched smoke twist from a kettle and vanish into the dark. You've ridden under wide skies. You've listened to quilts breathe. You've learned what it means to carry your comfort with you, not in a house, but in a bundle, not in a bed frame, but in a gesture, a fold, a roll, a resting place you make for yourself each time, no matter where the world moves you next. And now, as your thoughts soften and slow, maybe your own blanket feels just a bit heavier. In a good way. Anchoring. Familiar. Like a quiet promise that says, you're here. You're home. And nothing's pressing. So let that last thread of the steppe slip from your hands. Let the cart roll on without you for a while. Let the wind tug at your dreams but never carry them away. The fire's out now. The quilt is warm. You don't need to fold anything tonight. Just rest. Just breathe. You've earned it.